All right, hey nerds. So, going to talk about Alex O'Connor, just YouTube philosopher whose videos I like to comment on, and he's interesting because he clearly actually is knowledgeable about philosophy, and he often has interesting opinions, and he's a very good philosophical thinker. And he's, he used to be like a really hardcore militant atheist, like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, and I used to be too. But I'd say he's more similar to me now in that he's kind of almost an agnostic atheist, probably. But anyway, so sometimes he sounds so favorable to religion nowadays that he almost sounds Christian, and other times he still has such like scathing critiques of religion and specifically Christianity that he sounds like a militant atheist again. But he I'd say that he probably doesn't believe in God but thinks that it's possible, which is something similar to what I think. Anyway, I think his analogy here is a really perfect example of the message that he's describing here.
And the mistake that makes, this is crucial to me, is thinking that scientific laws somehow explain the universe instead of just describing them. It'll be as though we discovered a book.
Yeah, that's great. Like just that point, pretending that scientific laws uh discover the laws of the universe rather than just describing the universe. Like that's what science is. Science is phenomenally useful. Like I said the other day, whenever I try to clarify that whenever I criticize science, science is phenomenally useful, but it does it really tell us the laws of how the universe works? Like I was talking about the other day, over there in like Andromeda 7 on the farthest reaches of it, or in parts of the universe that we've never seen before, does 2 plus 2 equal 4? Are there numbers there? Does math work the same way? Does physics work the same way? Who knows? I'm not saying they're like magical dragons in 13 dimensions or some shit like that, but it's entirely like, how do we actually know with 100% objective absolute certainty that this is true? And most physicists probably wouldn't even say that, but they would say we can mathematically calculate it. Well, if we mathematically calculate it, does math obey our calculations? Like I was talking about the other day with that video, Math is Not Reality, with that physicist, in which that physicist Sabine Hossenfelder was saying that math describes reality, but will it ultimately explain everything? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it won't. Maybe if it is, it won't be math. Maybe if it is, it won't be science. That doesn't mean religion has the answers. That's just a boring, simple, like opposite conclusion to militant atheists. And their criticism of fundamentalist religion is correct, but they go overboard with that. But anyway, like I think that's true. Science explains things. It doesn't. It doesn't like reveal the true laws of things. It explains how they work, and most of the time, they're mostly correct. Most of the time, science is mostly correct about that sort of information.
Book of Shakespeare's sonnets and said, how did that get there? And we say, I don't know. And I start studying it. And I say, well, look, I've just discovered it follows this rhythm. Da, 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 da. And I'm going to call that iambic pentameter, the law of iambic pentameter. And I've also discovered this law that at the end of a sentence, there's usually a little dot. That's the law of punctuation, and how after that there are two types of letters and the big letter comes next. All these laws that I'm discovering. And someone says, well, where did the book come from? And you say, well, I mean, I don't know. We haven't answered that yet. But look at how much progress we've made in uncovering the laws of literacy. Surely one day.
That's a great analogy, right? If you discover, if you see a piece of music, you see some sonnets, you discover, like, one of his examples that I like there is that there's this period at the end of the sentence, the law of punctuation. So every sentence inherently always has a period at the end of it. You can make the similar analogy to the universe, like the universal forces of the universe, the strong and weak nuclear forces, gravity and electromagnetism. Obviously gravity is the big problem. So if we're saying, for example, does Andromeda work in the wait, not the Andromeda, does galaxy work over in the far reaches of Andromeda 7? Does it? Who knows? Like, does gravity just explain how things can work, and we have such a functional working knowledge of how these things work that we know that we can use that information to to harness gravity, like fly planes and fly spaceships and satellites and all that kind of stuff. But do are those actually based on the laws of how the universe works, or are they based on our working understanding of how we can get things to work, but they don't necessarily actually reveal the truth of anything? That's a good analogy.
One day this will come to explain the origins of the literary laws themselves.
Oh yeah, so like he was saying, they're like, if we're talking about the law of punctuation with the a period being at the end of every sentence, you can say who wrote, and if you say who wrote this, you say I don't know, but look at how much we've discovered about the true nature of the universe. Is this the true nature of the universe, or is it the opinion of the person who wrote the sonnet? And is it actually totally different other than that example? Or is this a rare example that obfuscates the illustrative the opposite of the norm? Or is it the norm? People assume that it is the norm. But if you're reading a book about the laws of the universe and you don't know who wrote the book, then do you know these are really the laws of the universe, or are they the laws of the universe according to the book? So, you can say similarly in terms of whether God created the universe, of course, that you can say science explains how the universe works, but we don't know who created the laws of science. However, like that's in the same way he's pointing out that there's a category error, there's also a category error in saying that in assuming that there has to be an author of the laws of the universe. There doesn't have to be an author of the laws of the universe, but that analogy does work well. So, like, according to who are the laws of the universe? I guess like countless scientists who have mathematically figured out all of these things to the point that they can actually work practically in reality. But the point is that, like, I don't think that he would say that God does exist, but he's deliberately being provocative and trying to sound this way in that clip. So, like, you can say whether there's a like if there's a God, did God create the laws of the universe? But then it leads to the infinite regress, who created God, obviously, right? But basically there is a good point that we can understand the laws of the universe and use them practically to fly planes and launch spaceships and accomplish all sorts of amazing feats with science. But this is just a working practical knowledge of how to use the forces of the universe. We don't actually know we don't actually know how well. I guess we kind of do. We don't actually know that they are objective laws of the universe. We just know that we have working knowledge of how to use these forces of the universe.
And the origin of the book, it's a category error. It's a total mistake.
That could almost
one day this will come to explain the origins of the literary laws themselves and the origin of the book. It's a category error. It's a total mistake.
That could almost come from a Christian trying to put science in its box. We've chosen a very forgiving atheist on this.
An atheist who practically sounds like he believes in God at this point.
I've got to ask, do you feel like there is any chance if we get you back in 10 years' time, you'd have a different answer to that question?
God willing. And the mistake that makes.
He just said that to be like this snooty philosopher version of a shit disturber. But yeah, I think that is a good point. Like, basically, like I've said many times before, I've come to learn that science is incredibly valuable and it's very useful for doing pragmatic things in life, even perhaps in spite of the fact that the laws of the universe, we don't actually know that they're laws. We just know that our working knowledge of us allows them to harness their forces to accomplish things. The laws of the universe are not actually the laws because we don't know whether there's an author of the universe or not. And there doesn't need to be an author of the universe, but we can't, it's just as arrogant as religion assuming that God created everything as it is to assume that that all of these laws of the universe, the laws of physics, work in all parts of the entire universe. And if there is an multiverse, I'm not sure how likely that is, but if there is a multiverse in every universe, do all of the laws work the same way? I I'm not saying that they don't, but my point and his point would probably be, who the fuck knows, man?